Um, so let's go into status correction. What does a status correction mean? Well, first of all, everyone knows when we were born, um, and we were born, and they came in with the information to fill out for your birth certificate. And I'm going to use myself as a mom. When I birthed my children, they came in and they said on a clipboard, here you go, we need you to fill out this piece of paper so that you can get your birth certificate for your child. They did not say to me, hey, you have the option to sign this birth certificate, meaning that you're going to sign your child over as a slave to the government. And from this point forward, the government owns your child and they're considered dead at sea and they become a slave to the system. Or, they did not say this, or would you like to keep your child on the land and soil common law jurisdiction and not put them into Admiralty maritime jurisdiction so that they have their God-given rights on the land and soil to go about their life the way that God planned without being enslaved to anyone or any system? Had they offered those two options, there's not a mom that I know that would have said, sure, we'll choose the government way. But we were not given that option, so here we are, and that was where the fraud came in. There is no statute of limitation on fraud. It was not presented to us with a choice, and so they were not fully transparent in the two options that we actually have. And the reason that I corrected my status was for that very reason. We want to be on the land and soil jurisdiction. That's where God wanted us to be. We want to recognize the fraud on paper and not just by mouth, because recognizing it on paper backs up what you know. Basically, they created that birth certificate, they created the bond, they created a social security number, which is your account number. Through that, they created the trust that we're, now being able to access as beneficiaries. You can't access it any other way. You're a beneficiary. You do not own that account. They set it up. You did not set it up. They used your name, copyrighted your all caps name, and made a corporation out of you so that they could take that birth certificate as a bond, sell it on the stock market, put that money into a trust account, and it's been a banking system ever since then. So they also, so that live birth record became a promissory note, and it was sold to the Federal Reserve. And then they, sold it on the stock market. Then they got the money and they created your Cesta KV trust, saying that you will never, ever, ever own anything because you'll never own real property. I'll put it that way. You'll never own a car fully outright. Everyone says, oh yeah, we paid off our car, we own it. No, you don't. If you look at what a title means and you see what the title is, you're a rent. You forever. They own it. The Crown owns real property. The Crown owns everything that is a real property transaction. So, if you look at a deed when you sign the deed on your mortgage paperwork, it says that you're going to forever be a renter in your home. It says it in the black and white fine print. So, I encourage you to look at that. And then I'm not going to go into what I've learned recently. We'll go into that in a minute. But the status correction is important because really the reason that applies not only for your own freedom to have it, but it places you in common law jurisdiction versus being in maritime jurisdiction where you are automatically placed. And with that said, if you get stopped in a traffic stop or you're in a court case and you have your authenticated birth certificate, you have your status corrected, and you're able to present that and know who you are and know how to stand up to that, then there's power in knowledge. Knowledge is power, power in knowledge, and that's why education is very important. So if someone were to, if a police officer were to stop me for just driving down the road, and I rolled through a stop sign, or I, was 5 miles or 10 miles over the the speed limit, whatever. If I got pulled over, I have my packet of paperwork in my car that shows that I have recognized the fraud. I'm not in your jurisdiction. Under color of law, you have no control over me. Unless there is an injured party and you can produce an injured party, you can't mess with me unless I have stolen, trespassed, done bodily injury, bodily harm, murdered someone, any of that. That automatically, there's, even in common law, if you do any of those things, you're going to face the punishment for that. But if you're driving down the road, you're not doing it in a commercial capacity. So if you're a truck driver and you're working, but you're off the clock, you're not driving a commercial vehicle, you're in your own car doing your own thing, the status correction applies to you at that time. The only time that you're in maritime jurisdiction at that point is if you're in a commercial vehicle driving commercially, then you do fall under maritime. But any other time, that car that you're driving is an extension of your home, and they cannot impede on your right to travel. So having that documentation has proved, there's so many testimonies of how that works. And if you have the authentic birth certificate, on top of that, that's the highest level of authority you can have. So getting your birth certificate sent to the state where you were born and getting it authenticated, all you have to do is look on your Secretary of State website, and it'll tell you how to go about authenticating your birth certificate. It doesn't cost much money. It doesn't take a lot of time. And it's the highest level of authority to say that I am a living woman or man. Because once you sign that birth certificate, or once that birth certificate is signed and you're enslaved, you're considered dead at sea. So the reason you want to do a status correction is to prove that you are living. You are not dead. Until you come back and say, I am living, I am in the common law jurisdiction, and I recognize the fraud. Until then, you stay enslaved, and there's nothing you can do about it because they own you. I recently found out something very disturbing to me as a Christian is very recently. I learned that we have 3 sets of KV trusts set up. We have one set up with our birth certificate. We have one that manages real property. We have one that is a Cesta KV set up by the Roman cult to handle our baptismal registry. Because when a pastor of a church, some small churches don't do this, but some of the bigger organizations do. I can confess to that because my kids were baptized in a large church, and we got a certificate. Well, I just recently found out that that's a bond. It's in their all caps name as a bond. Creates a third Cesta KV. Your baptismal record creates a third Cesta KV that now owns your soul. Okay, so you're dead at sea, but then you got baptized. They have a bond because you did, if they send it in, and now they own your soul too. So unless you come back and get your birth certificate authenticated, which is a responsibility that you have. Drew and I do not handle that. That is something you have to do on your own. Go to your Secretary of State website, look up how to do it, mail it in, and they'll mail it back to you. And that says simply that I'm a living person. I'm not dead. And then your status correction says that I am a living woman, I am a living man on the land and soil. I'm putting myself back into common law jurisdiction, because what happens in a court case, or what happens if you were to go before the court and you have never ever proven that you're living, they can look at you and laugh, even if you talk the language at some points, because one word can perjure you. And their job is to perjure you, especially if you know who you are and you don't have it on paper. So this is it more applies to those types of situations. If you go to court, or if have a traffic citation, or if you're going through family law stuff, or any of those things, legal stuff is where a status correction benefits you. But at some point, whether we do anything wrong or not, we're all out here getting traffic tickets. At some point, you've gotten a ticket. If you haven't, God bless you. But I have, and he has, and most people have. And at some point, it becomes necessary to have that, And where was I going with this? Because I'm all over the place. Let me explain to you how it works. When you go into a courtroom, because they have your all caps name, you've never said, hey, I'm living, I'm not dead, I proved that I'm not living. The highest authority through the Secretary of State has authenticated my birth certificate saying that I'm a living woman. So you can't mess with me now. Because if you don't have that, you are collateral to them. They have your corporate name. They're ticketing the corporation of you. Okay? Anytime you get a ticket, they're ticketing the all caps name. If you go into court for any court case, they're ticketing the all caps name. They're trying the all caps name. But you're just like the lender. Okay, so let's back up. And this is the best way for me to describe it in elementary terms, since we're all having to go back to school. Your lender says that they're a lien holder on your car. And if you don't pay, we can come and pick it up and take it away from you. Same applies if you go into court and they say, hey, we own him or we own her. And so the body of you becomes collateral to the corporation of you. Okay, so they own you unless you have authenticated your birth certificate and proved that you're a living soul. They own you, and your body is collateral for them. So I highly suggest that you do that, because that's how they put people in jail. And then you've heard, most of you on here know Chris Hauser and have followed Chris Hauser, and he talks about habeas corpus. Well, you've got to have an authenticated birth certificate proving that you are a living soul. And if you have someone that is in jail for an unnecessary statute and not an actual crime, okay, that's how they deal with habeas corpus. So, anyone that denies an authenticated birth certificate, that can actually be a dishonor that can go to the Supreme Court level, and the judge there's prison time and there's fines and there's all kind of hammers that come down on those judges and those county clerks and those people that are involved in that at the Supreme Court level. So if they're in dishonor of honoring you as a living soul, that is not something they want to do. So, am I missing anything? If y'all have any questions, because I know I'm all over the place. I'm not a teacher. I just try to talk from what I know. And last night, I know that the authenticated birth certificate is also considered, because we're talking biblical here. And the Sesta KV, the third Sesta KV that they set up under the Roman cult with your baptismal certificate that owns your soul. Where was I going with that? That disturbed me. But your authenticated birth certificate becomes your ecclesiastical deed poll. That's the official name for it, is an ecclesiastical deed poll. And if a judge denies that and dishonors you with an authenticated birth certificate with no bodily injury, with no trespassing, no stealing, no harming an individual, they don't want to tread on that, okay? That's all I can say. So having your status corrected basically says, I'm a living soul. I am on the land and soil jurisdiction. I fall under common law. I have the right to bear arms per the Second Amendment of the Constitution. We go back to the original Constitution. We don't go back to the amended version. We go back to the original Constitution. So, which is 1767, right? 1776. Sorry, 1776. Okay, I get, because there's a lot of things in the 1770s that happened. Okay. So I can answer questions from here if you want. Basically, your collateral property for them, I wanted to get that out. I still carry a license. I have a real estate license. I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice because I still carry my driver's license right this minute because, first of all, it's not up for renewal.
I actually have to carry. I went to rent a car the other day, and the only way I could get it was with my driver's license.
You have to have a government-issued ID. So whenever we do a status correction, I have an affidavit of sovereignty that says that the reason that I still carry my licenses is because I don't have a choice. I haven't been given another choice in society. So for society reasons, I still carry it. But I do not wish to contract. I do not contract. I do not consent to anything. And that's part of the paperwork, on top of all of the 18 USC codes and 26 USC codes that put you back into common law jurisdiction. So if y'all want to ask questions, please do. I think that it's important to have it because at some point you might need it. If you have kids, like my kids are in their 20s, I think it's very important for them to have it and to know who they are. If something happens to me, God forbid, I'm going to do my best to share the information I know. What they choose to do with it is on them. But, to me, recognizing the fraud that's been brought upon you on paper and then especially with your authenticated birth certificate, if you don't want to do all the other paperwork, at least do that part. And then the secure party creditor stuff, you're going to basically create bonds on yourself. You're going to, have hold harmless agreements, copyrights, all kind of things. And then you can even go further as to being an executor. So that's more detailed, and that's something that you need to know how to use and how to operate. But the status correction is really used in, recognizing who you are, traffic stuff, court stuff, that kind of thing. But yeah, it was very disturbing to me that a baptismal record creates a bond. That's very disturbing to me. It was very disappointing to read, and it opened my eyes, and maybe it was God speaking to me, but some of these large churches that we know are not for the good necessarily, but for the money, the money gets kicked back on those baptisms. So the fact that some of these, not all, okay, I'm not saying all, but I would say a good majority of them, of the large mega churches are probably doing it for kickback, and they push baptisms at an early age for a reason. That's my opinion. I'm not calling out any churches. I don't know any specifically. That opened my eyes to a lot of things that I could see possibilities of why they push so hard. So, the passport stuff, I can tell you as part of the secured party creditor stuff, when you do a status correction, we don't get the passport for you. That all comes with going a little bit further and a little bit deeper into, bonds, creating bonds on yourself, setting up, security agreements and hold harmless agreements and those types of things, which we know how to do and we know what to do and all of that, which is why we're going to offer it. But status correction comes before. You have to have status correction paperwork in place to go that route. I have some people that have their secure party creditor stuff, but they've never done the status correction. In my opinion, the status correction should come first, and then there's an order in which you file things to be a secure party creditor. So recognizing the fraud that was placed against you on paper first, putting that into public record on your status correction, and then moving into the SPC stuff is what I highly recommend. If you do things out of order at some point, you might run into a situation where you did something out of order and the bar and the crown have a way of backing that up and saying that you did it at the wrong time and now it's null and void. So it's important to do it in steps, the right steps. So
I've seen people ask, actually my birth certificate is a certificate of live birth. Tara's is actually a birth certificate. I went on ahead and authenticated mine. So
you want the authentication because it comes with a seal and it comes with a certification on top stating that you are living and it came from the highest power, which when you really read into this SDKV trust and how that all works and how that all played out, unless you have that from the Secretary of State, you don't have a higher power saying that you're living. So just because it says that it's a certificate of live birth, without it being authenticated, you're still dead at sea because you have a social security number. So it's important to have that because it doesn't hold any weight unless a higher authority has signed off on it.
Every state's different. What office specifically at the Secretary of State do we need to go to authenticate birth certificate? Every state's different.
But so you should be able to Google it in and say, authenticate your birth certificate or get an apostille.
I mean, I just went in Texas. I went to the Secretary of State website, and it had a place on there to authenticate, certify or apostille your birth certificate. So you'll need to look at your Secretary of State's website to see where it needs to be sent. There was a form that I had to print out for us to do it. And that was both Texas for her and Alabama for me. So Alabama took about 2 weeks, or actually a little less than 2 weeks. Texas took about 6. So
unless you want to drive to Austin and wait in line, which I didn't want to do that, but I wasn't in a hurry for it either. I just wanted to have it done. So